Hello there, my name is Dr. Salim Javed and we have been talking about understanding cinema, where we are talking about how the first motion picture camera kinetograph was developed by William Kennedy Laurie Dixon. Now, when the first motion picture camera was invented, there was a different sensibility attached to the motion picture camera, that we need to capture reality. Okay, we need to have a sort of a documentary style of having moving pictures, and initially, in fact, that was the case also. Like Augustus and Louis Lumiere, I'll be talking about them, but let me first talk about the first motion picture camera, kinetograph. Now, kinetograph, developed by William Kennedy Laurie Dixon and Thomas Alva Edison, it has a very interesting anecdote here. Like Thomas Alva Edison, he was able to patent 4 caveats, 3 and then 1 later, so 4 caveats, and he had not believed much. He did not have much belief in the in this technology. So he patented the technology of kinetograph for US only, USA, and had he paid $150 more, he could have got the patent of this technology throughout the world. But because he did not believe much in the technology, he said, okay, fine, now we are able to capture the still images, and it is to capture the life as it is, the actualities, as we call them. I'll be talking about actualities. So he said, okay, fine, this is something which will not get the which will not catch the imagination of people, but this is an invention, so I have patented it for USA. But interestingly, it was patented in and for USA, but outside USA, which is rest of the world, like France, Germany, England, other places also, Russia, it was absolutely available. You buy it, now it is your. Patent says that if you buy it, fine, you use it, but you can't experiment with my equipment. So in US, yes, that was the case. If you buy a kinetograph, you just use it, you do whatever you want, you do whatever you have to do with it, but you can't make changes in kinetograph. But because the patent was only for US and not for rest of the world, so everybody outside USA was free to experiment with kinetograph, which actually proved to be boon for humankind, but very fatal for Thomas Alva Edison. Now, Augustus and Louis Lumiere, from France, they experimented with kinetograph and made their own machine, which is called cinematograph, cinematography as we call it today, cinematography. So they had a private viewing of their films that they made with the help of cinematograph, which was developed or which was fashioned on kinetograph because it was patent free in France, and they had their first screening on 22nd March 1895. Now, it is very interesting, that this date, particular date, 22nd March 1895 is really important, because sometimes you only get to hear December 28, 1895. Now, December 28, 1895 was for the first commercial exhibition at Café Capucine in Paris. So it was the first commercial exhibition, whereas on 22nd March 1895 it was the, like, people were seeing the film that was shown. One of the films that was shown was workers leaving the factory, Lumiere's factory. So that was shown. So if I say that Max and Melies Sklendolavisky also demonstrated their bioscope, the machine like cinematograph, there was a bioscope on 1st November 1895. A lot of students come to me, sir, why you are saying that that was the first, Max and Emily Sklendolowski were the first, because they were exhibiting their film in 1st November 1895, and Augustus and Louis Lumiere are doing it on December 28. So, November comes first, December comes later. So, that is why I have put this point in the lecture, that though they showed their film on December 28, 1895, but that was the first commercial exhibition, whereas they already have shown, they have already put up a private show, okay, for other people on 22nd March 1895, and that is the reason that we talk about Augustus and Louis Lumiere first and other people later. So, bioscope was developed by Max and Emil Sklendolowski, and they used it on 1st November 1895. Then in London, in UK, it was Robert William Paul, and he developed theatrograph in year 1896, and he also called his theatrograph as animatograph. Now, this so far is that how we moved from camera obscura to silver compound. From silver compound, that silver compound had nothing to do in the development of first photograph. It was bitumen of Judea which was responsible to have the first permanent picture. And then how from Joseph Nicéphore Niépce to Jacques Daguerre, how we had a system, how it developed, how gelatin dry plate process came into being, how we understood the importance of having photograph on a piece of paper rather than having it in metal. Then what were the other developments, how zoopraxiscope was developed, how from zoopraxiscope to chronophotographic gun, from chronophotographic gun to Thomas Alva Edison, William Kennedy Laurie Dixon, and then from William Kennedy Laurie Dixon to Augustus and Louis Lumiere, and from cinematograph to bioscope to theatrograph to animatograph. So, this was the entire gamut of development when we talk about how the motion picture camera comes into being. Now, now the challenge is that you have developed a camera which is capturing the motion. Now, what you do with it? Now, that is the next challenge. So, one of the first mindset that people had, be that Louis Lumiere, Augustus and Louis Lumiere, be that Emil and Max Sklendolowski, be that Robert William Paul, be that Thomas Alva Edison himself, they said, look, like kinetograph, in case of kinetograph was bulky, big. So, if there is a dance performance, so the dance performer has to come in the studio and perform in front of the camera. So, that was one. Black Maria was the name of the studio, which was the first studio in the world developed by Thomas Alva Edison and William Kennedy Laurie Dixon. Now, so with the kinetograph, the like Oat Sneeze, world's one of the oldest films, Oat Sneeze. You know, one person comes, he takes something and then he sneezes, oat. So, Oat Sneeze. So, the event was brought in front of the camera to perform, because kinetograph was big. The advantage with cinematograph, which was developed on kinetograph, that it was manageable, you know, it was comparatively manageable as compared to kinetograph. It was more accessible, it was, you were able to move with cinematograph, with bioscope, with theatrograph, with animatograph, all these things. So, from from this size, not exactly this size, otherwise I will go out of the frame, from this size they were able to put it to this size. So, if I have a large box, I have a small box. So, the small box having all the qualities of the large box is more convenient. So, that was the case with kinetograph and the cinematograph. Now, you have developed motion picture camera. Now, what to do with it? Augustus and Louis Lumiere were sending the cameramen across the world to go and shoot how is Africa, how is India, how is Japan, how is Russia, so life as it is. But one person that I really want to talk about before I talk about anyone else in the journey of narrative, that was the title of the lecture, the journey of narrative. The narrative itself was the product of a man called Georges Méliès. Now, who is Georges Méliès? Now, Georges Méliès is actually, he used to run a theatre of magic, and he was a magician, he used to use tricks and everything. And when on 28 December 1895, Lumiere's brothers invited people to have the first paid viewing, he was one of them. Georges Méliès was one of them. Now, Georges Méliès actually saw the potential that how I can use this machine in my tricks, and how I can use this machine to increase the effect of magic that I really put on stage. The phrase that you have heard at some point in your life, that cinema is magic, is because of this man called Georges Méliès, because he was a magician. Now, so this is one development. The next development is that in the autumn of 1896, 1895 the first screening, in the 1896, in the autumn of 1896, Georges Méliès discovered the narrative potential of film editing. Now, this is something which nobody did, which nobody even realized before Georges Méliès, and the editing actually was discovered by chance. Okay. Earlier, when the first motion picture camera, all these people, those who were into the making of it, like Thomas Alva Edison, William Kennedy, Laurie Dixon, then you have Augustus and Louis Lumiere, you have Emil and Max Sklendolavisky, you have Robert William Paul. All these people are there to capture the reality, the way I am right now. But nobody actually was there to realize that it has a narrative potential also, that you can say stories, there is a scope of manipulation, there is a scope of editing. Nobody knew it. Even in fact, Georges Méliès wasn't aware of it. But the editing was discovered by accident. And what was the accident? I will be talking about that accident, which is a pleasant accident, by the way. Had that not been there, we would not have been watching the films as we do it today. Now, what Méliès' discovery of the narrative potential of film editing did, that it revolutionized the film medium by transcending its simplistic nature. What is the simplistic nature? That if I am on a road, there are people passing by, there are cars going here and there, and there is a cart which is like moving from left side to the right side of the frame. That is the simplistic nature. So, life as it is, or just as a single shot. So, what I explained just now was a just single shot, or that I have been talking about actualities. These are like life as it is. So, all the developments was there to capture life as it is, actualities, and here comes a man who accidentally discovers the potential of editing, which revolutionized the simplistic nature of one short story into a potential instrument of narrative storytelling. So, this now what does Georges Méliès do? Now, Georges Méliès, as I said, was a professional magician. He goes on to see the screening, and he goes to Augustus and Louis Lumiere and says, "It's a wonderful invention. Thank you for inviting me. I give you money as decided by you, sell me this camera called cinematograph. Okay. Augustus and Louis Lumiere knew about Georges Méliès, and they knew that this man is actually a magician, not symbolically, not it's not a hyperbole. He was professionally a magician. Now they knew that if we sell our machine to this man, he is our competitor, because they were they were thinking of getting into distribution also, because eventually, and they did also. So they knew that if we sell our machine to Georges Méliès, we are actually inviting a competitor. So Augustus and Louis Lumiere said, no, 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 thank you very much. We are not interested selling our camera to you. Georges Méliès was surprised, but he knew the potential of this entire activity of this kinetograph, of this cinematograph. So what he did, he actually went to England, Robert William Paul, and bought theatrograph. I said there was another name called animatograph. Then he bought animatograph from there, and then he developed, he developed his own camera. There was a instrument maker called Lucien Corsten, and Lucien Corsten actually helped develop him the camera that I was talking about, that in the autumn of 1896 he accidentally discovered the potential of editing. So when you read books, it says that Georges Méliès made the camera, but Georges Méliès actually used the services of one person who made the camera. Now, obviously he was a magician, he was developing his own tricks, so he was a mechanic also. It's not that he did not know anything about the camera. He himself was there, but obviously he took help also, and which should duly be recognized also. But a lot of books don't write that who was the person who helped Georges Méliès. Now, what is, when it comes to the potential, what Georges Méliès has done, what Georges Méliès has contributed. Okay. Georges Méliès is basically, he is a magician, he is an actor, he is a mechanic, he is a promoter, he is a distributor, he is everything. Georges Méliès. Georges Méliès is everything, and he not only discovered the potential of narrative film through editing, he developed a lot of techniques like time lapse. Like nobody actually was doing it. Georges Méliès is the man who was doing it. He is the one who is creating special effects. He is the one who is doing it. Time lapse he was doing it, substituting, he was doing the splicing, he was doing the reappearing and disappearing technique, he was transforming, he was using dissolve techniques. People were after actualities, and here is the person who is doing unimaginable things with films. So this is how two different style. It is because of Georges Méliès that we have narrative films. Otherwise, all we have had was only documentary. Had Georges Méliès was not been there, he was obviously he with a trip to the moon, which was released in 1902, he actually became an international figure, and then he kept on making films with Pathé and everything, and he got ruined also. Okay, and then he started work. He left the filmmaking. You have to really understand this man called Georges Méliès if you really are passionate about how films are made. His own film, his own life. There is a beautiful film, I think Martin Scorsese made a film called Hugo. which is on the life of George Méliès, when he left filmmaking, when he was absolutely forgotten by a lot of people, and then how one journalist discovered him, how people actually started understanding, okay, what sort of a man, what sort of a contribution he has done, and how when people accepts him back, his own life story is absolutely uh, horrible and beautiful. I mean, two different expression in one sentence. His own life is beautiful and horrible, horrible and beautiful. So he is a man who is discovering tricks for narrative film world. On the other side, documentary is going on, and he is the one who is leading the front of narrative world single-handedly. Though after 7-8 years, people reject him. And there is a beautiful quote, his last words, which actually jab my heart. I'll be telling you about that, the how he was praised by everyone, how he was left by everyone, left out by everyone, and his last word, what Charlie Chaplin said about him, what D.W. Griffith said about him, and what he himself said about him. Those things are, it's because I teach cinema. So when I was writing those lines, I was like, tears were there in my eyes, that how can someone say these lines for himself? And then, so I'll be talking about that. I was carried away. I'm extremely sorry. I was carried away by the emotion, because when I started, I knew about George Méliès, to be very honest. I knew his experimentation, how he developed, how he discovered the editing, all the trick shots, trick films. This is because of George Méliès. This terminology, this vocabulary is because of George Méliès. That cinema is magic. It's a magical world. Cinema is magic. This is all because of George Méliès. A man who is discovering different sorts of. I mean, something which was never done before. He is a pioneer in that sense. Time lapse, reappearing, disappearing, dissolve. All these things that we can think of, which we take for granted today. Somebody has put his life for it. Somebody has put his life for it. Now, another interesting thing that let's talk about George Méliès. I was carried away, but I become passionate when I talk about George Méliès, and why every student of cinema must know about George Méliès when it comes to we owe him everything. I owe him everything. My entire passion, my entire profession, because my forte is cinema, is because of George Méliès. Now, so I become slightly passionate when I talk about George Méliès. So George Méliès actually had a shoe business. His father was into making shoes. They have a family business of shoemaking. So when George Méliès grew up, went to school, studied, all those things are there. So he said, look, I am not interested in the business of shoemaking. The portion that he inherited from his father, he sold that portion to his brothers, two of his brothers back, and said, okay, you have my portion, just pay me, and I move out of the business. But brothers were also happy. Rather than having 3, rather than having 33, now they have 50-50 of the business. Obviously they had to pay for it. Now with that money, George Méliès actually acquired Théâtre Robert Houdin. Now why I am saying theatre, whereas theatre is written on screen. Now the actual pronunciation, theatre is an English pronunciation, and théâtre is a French word. Center, there are a lot of people who make mistake in writing when they are writing center. So is it ending with er or re? This is a problem because it's a French word, be that theatre or be that center. Now these two words are French words. So if you say théâtre, you will never make a mistake in terms of spelling. If you say centre or center, RE, you will never make a mistake. So he acquired a theatre in English, but in French he acquired Théâtre Robert Houdin. Now, where he developed 30 new illusions and achieved considerable popularity. Now, why I said that he was not only a magician, he was a mechanic also, because he is developing his own illusions. Think of those times. So he's an illusionist, he's a magician. A lot of films are there in my mind because of this. After viewing, as I said, after viewing Lumiere brothers cinematography, George Méliès thought that I really want to purchase. I have told you things about that, but they said no, thank you very much. So he went on to buy cinematograph developed by Robert William Paul. Now, following his examination of equipment and subsequent modification, he created his own camera, as I said, with the help of instrument maker Lucien Corsten. Now, this is something which is not available in many books. Not I am saying it is not available at all. Yes, this information is available, but not in many books. So, he fabricated his own instrument, developed his own camera with Lucien Corsten, and by April 18, now this is important, this information is important. Now, by 1896, Théâtre Robert Houdin has established itself as the inaugural public film theatre globally, with Georges Méliès recognized as the cinema's first independent producer director. Think of this man, he is world's first independent producers director. Parthe is there, Parthe is there. I'll be talking about, and the collaboration between Parthe and Georges Méliès also. But by April 1896, Théâtre Robert Houdin established itself as the inaugural public theatre globally, and Georges Méliès becoming the first independent producer director. I'll be talking about Georges Méliès extensively, about his work. So, this lecture was basically how from normal life we come to still images, from still images how we come to first motion picture camera, from first motion picture camera how we are getting into the world of narration, narratives, the journey of narrative, and the man who is responsible for the creation of this narrative world, Georges Méliès, that I am talking about, and I owe him everything. Thank you very much.